Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, welcome to Bhagavad Shravanam. So we'll chant some prayers together, that'll be on the screen here, and then we'll begin our discussion. Everybody has a handout? Okay. So you help lead because I can't see actually. It's okay, it's okay. Timarandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatan Sahagana Vaganathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Shri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatharine Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Gaura Sambandha Jnanam Ayini Gauri Namaha Yudhikajaya Shakti Maya Namostate Namahe Suravani Shimurtaye Vinatarinam Vipanugari Kishoraya Sakshat Vairagya Murtaye Kirlamba Samode Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Shvarupaya Rupa Nuga Varayate Nistyam Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Navadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tvijay Namaha Chakapadam Vimstam Aktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakti Shaktikam Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Welcome. So we're going to be looking at Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 15. There's handouts. You can pass one handout here. Right here. I entitled this Living Above Material Consciousness. Anyone interested in learning how to do that? Okay, we're going to discuss that. How we can actually do that. So we're looking at the 15th chapter, but I want to give some context. So I'm going to go back to the 14th chapter. First of all, I ask for your blessings that I can say something in line with Guru Parampara for the benefit of all of the devotees here and for the pleasure of Shri Shri Radha Mulidhar, Shri Gaurachandra. Satyaraj Prabhu asks for your blessings so I can say something for everyone's benefit. So, after the battle of Kurukshetra, Krishna went to Dwarka. And very soon after, Arjuna followed him because Arjuna wanted to know of Krishna's next activities. So several months passed by, and Yudhisthira Maharaj, who was the new king, he became anxious because Arjuna was gone for several months and hadn't returned yet. And he started to notice that there were inauspicious omens in nature. He was described there in the 14th chapter that he noticed the irregularities of the seasons. Just like today, right? It's supposed to be summer. It's cold outside and dark. It feels like... So Yudhisthira Maharaj was noticing the seasonal changes were irregular, dark skies. He noticed that his horses seemed to be weeping. And he was seeing all these omens. There's a science to omens, omen readers. Just by observing material nature, they can understand something of the future that's coming. So there's a science to that, which we don't really know so much anymore. We just know when it gets cloudy, it may rain. That's as far as our omen reading goes. But formerly, even now, you can find some people where they tune into exactly what's happening in nature, even the sounds of birds in the moment, and they can understand, make some prediction of what is to come. So... obviously, Yudhisthira Maharaj knew this science, and just by observing nature, he can understand that something was, inauspicious omens were suggesting something. And also, not just in material nature, but also in human nature. He was noticing that the people were becoming, it says, more established in qualities like greed and envy and pride. He was noticing amongst his citizens that these qualities were becoming stronger. And so he could see that something was happening. And Arjuna had not yet returned. He went to see Krishna and Arjuna didn't return. So just at this time, Arjuna finally came back. And Arjuna came up to Yudhisthira Maharaj and bowed down in respect. And when he came up from bowing down, Yudhisthira Maharaj saw Arjuna's face. And he understood something is wrong with Arjuna. He's visibly dejected and pale. Arjuna is a powerful warrior. He's always bright and bold and strong. But he looked very weak. And so Yudhisthira Maharaj begins to question Arjuna as to the cause of his looking like this. And this is a great section because we can see certain things we can learn from Yudhisthira's questions. He says, well, first of all, he says, is your health bad? Right? That's the first we can understand. If someone doesn't look so strong, we can question their health. But then his other questions reveal to us what's important or what we should be a little bit aware of. His next question says, were you unable to keep a promise that you gave to someone? Something there, right? If we break promises all the time, we might think it's no big deal. But if you keep setting some promise to do something, maybe some arrangement with somebody, what happens if you keep breaking promises? What happens to you? Yeah, and maybe you're not so aware of what's happening, but you stop trusting yourself. You stop trusting yourself, because if you just keep breaking off promises, then you start to not really trust yourself. And once you stop trusting yourself, you'll also stop trusting others. And so we don't always see. We think, no big deal. I said this and I'm going to do this instead, or I'm going to change this. But if you're very strong with your word, right? They have that saying, my word is my bond. That if you become very strong with your word, you start to feel stronger inside. You become more united inside. So then he questions. He sees that he's pale. He's looking like this. Did you break a promise? What's another thing he asks? Were you unable to give charity to someone who asked for it? You know, if someone comes to you really desperate, in need. This is tough in New York because this is happening all the time. But if someone you know and love and care and you have a relationship and they come really in need for your help and you're unable to give, this is also hard for oneself. And there'll be reactions in the body, in the mind. He says, were you disrespectful to an honorable woman? A woman is honorable and has that good character, and we find ourselves being disrespectful or offending a woman, that will have a consequence on our consciousness. Of course, disrespecting anybody, but especially here it's mentioned woman, an honorable woman. So he goes through a list of different reasons why Arjuna may be dejected. But finally he comes to the point. And he said, or is it, Arjuna, that you have now lost the association of your most intimate friend in Lord Sri Krishna? So he gave so many reasons of what it might be. But then finally he says, or is it that you've lost this association to your most intimate friend Krishna? And then the 15th chapter begins. So that's all the four. Ladini Shakti Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Welcome. And then the 15th chapter begins right on that note. It's significant, right? Because we have a fundamental dissatisfaction. And then different things in life trigger it. And we think it's those things that are causing my dissatisfaction. But it goes so much deeper than that. Right? Something happens, somebody comes and attacks me verbally or insults me in some way, and I respond with anger, and I think this person has caused my anger. Right? We point to what was the cause. But after all, this anger is coming out of me. This situation, this person may have triggered it, but I have it in me. Someone else may not get as angry. Why am I getting angry? Why is this thing bringing so much fear? We think it's this, I'm afraid of this thing, right? But actually that thing is just bringing it to the surface. But I have fear deep inside. Why is that? What's the root of that? I have anger deep inside. All of these things are inside of us, and then different people and situations bring them out. And we usually put the blame on that immediate situation without seeing there's a fundamental issue. There's a fundamental dissatisfaction. So we have to take care of what happens on the surface, but to also understand that this, after all, this is coming out of me. It's in me. It's not that that person is the cause. Somehow deep inside we're not at peace with ourselves. What is that? So all these different causes are given by Yudhisthira Maharaj. But then finally he comes to the essence of it. We've forgotten our most fundamental relationship with God. And because of that, if that's in order, then by God's grace we can overcome all of these little situational problems. If we're really feeling the Spirit of God, experiencing God within ourselves, then these other things can fall away. So we'll look therefore at this first verse that I have listed there, 1:15:1. Somebody want to read this verse? And it kind of brings us right up to where I stopped, but we'll still hear the verse and get an idea.
Santa Goswami said, Arjuna, the celebrated friend of Lord Krishna, was grief-stricken because of his strong feeling of separation from Krishna, over and above all of Maharaj Yudhishthira's speculative inquiries.
Okay, so over and above all of Maharaj's inquiries, he finally came to the point when he realized that is it that Krishna has gone away? So when Krishna, at the end of Dwapara Yuga, Krishna leaves, and then that's the beginning of Kali Yuga. And that's why Yudhisthira was seeing all of these inauspicious omens. The times are changing. And Krishna not only leaves physically, but he leaves more and more from within the consciousness of the living beings. Because of our, Prabhupada says in one place, our deliberate forgetfulness. Sometimes we say that we've forgotten God. And we just think, oh, I've just forgotten. But interesting, right? Deliberate forgetfulness. At some point it was deliberate to forget God. And then so much time goes on that we actually forget. Completely. And we think, well, I just can't remember. If I could remember, it'd be no problem. But there was some deliberate forgetfulness. Isn't this the way it works? You have to do something, you have to take care of something, and you deliberately kind of push it out. But then with time, you actually forget it. It still has its consequences inside of us, but we kind of really forget it in our minds. For a long time, if you just keep putting something off, putting it off, it goes so far into the background that it's forgotten. So when we say forgetfulness of God, we have to understand it in that way, that there is a kind of turning away from God, and then that goes on for so long that we actually forget God, and therefore we have to find arguments for the existence of God. That's all on a different level, but actually within ourselves, the deeper you go, you realize God is there. God is real, but we've forgotten. But we have to go through a process of remembering, turning our face back to Krishna. And then we'll see that he was there all along, but I had forgotten. So, after this, any comments or questions on that point? Or any thoughts on that before we just continue on? Anything so far? Okay. So after this, yes. Oh, Satyaraj Prabhu. Mm. 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 Yeah, there's like a spiritual level and a material level, and just noticing the difference in that, the grief that he's feeling. There's a grief. This grief is also somehow very high. It's not just material, because in the next few verses we'll describe how this grief is completely pacifying the heart of Arjuna also. So it is a kind of... Right. Yeah, because it's in relation to Krishna. But then there's a grief in this world that just, it's under a different material energy, and it's not uplifting or pacifying or purifying, which simply just causes pain. Yes?
I'm just thinking about the question you were saying from chapter 14.
Yeah.
Yudhishthira's also, he doesn't want to say it.
Yeah. He's afraid to get there.
I don't want to say,
Yes.
Is that Krishna's left?
Exactly. And he's in some way hoping it's because, again, he's seeing the signs, right? And he knows Arjuna, he went to see Krishna, but he hasn't returned. And so it's a fear that he has, but he first checks with all these things, but finally he comes to the point, or is it that Krishna has left us? And so he understands what's happening, but he's hoping it's not coming to that. But then finally when he lands on that point, then Arjuna, it's described, he can hardly even speak when he says that. So after this first verse of the 15th chapter, then you see I skip lots of verses here. So what Arjuna essentially says in those verses is that all my strength, all my accomplishments, all my abilities were due only to the grace of Krishna. And Arjuna says, I have the same bow in my hand, and I have the same arrows, and I'm the same Arjuna, but without Krishna's grace, I'm completely powerless. That's a deep realization. We talk about it theoretically, but to realize that I'm actually powerless. But all of these abilities and powers I have are from God. Right? Think about the different senses, the sense powers, the power to see, to hear, to touch, to smell, to taste. Where did these come from? Did we decide, did we somehow put these things together and then we have this ability? These are powers of God that were given. The power to think, the power to feel, the power to do or to will. But to live in that realization that actually I am totally dependent. All these, I take ownership of all these as if they're mine. But these are gifts given to me, and they can also be taken away. We know that, right? But imagine really living in that understanding, in that consciousness always, that I'm always dependent on the grace of God. And He's given these powers, and they can also be gone in a moment. And so Arjuna is realizing that all of his powers, all of his strength, all of his abilities, without Krishna's grace, he's saying right now, I feel totally powerless. It's an amazing realization. You know, like somebody told Prabhupada once that, Prabhupada, I am the most fallen. And Prabhupada said, you are not the most anything. He said, you are simply insignificant. Even to say, we can become proud of our humility, of our so-called humility. I'm the most fallen, he said, you're not the most of anything. You're just insignificant, completely dependent on the Lord. Walk around in that consciousness. It's not depressing, actually. It's just it's a freeing realization to realize that by God's power, everything is possible. It's beautiful. You'll be lighter. You won't be more. It's not a heavy thing. We compare all these spiritual states to material reflections that are just painful. But to really actually realize your dependence on God, that's true empowerment. Ironically. So, all of our powers, we take ownership of all of them, thinking these are my abilities, but actually these are not my abilities. Think of your worst day ever. Think of a day where you were just suffering. Everyone got something? Think of that day where you were just suffering from being just overwhelmed. Where was your power? Where is your power to change that? Why don't you just change it and get over it? Right? We have free will. Why don't you just overcome it? We couldn't. We have no power. Circumstances, material energy did something to us. Some circumstances changed, and then we realized, I have no power in the face of this circumstance. And then those circumstances change again and maybe get better and more stable, and then we think I have power. No, you don't have power. You're still dependent on the material energy. This is what it means to be surrendered to the modes of material nature. The modes shift, and then all of a sudden we find I'm in a situation where I have no power to do anything because of some change in my life. Some change in the material energy, and then we realize I have no power. And then it gets back, and it comes back, and things get stable again. Now I'm powerful again. But no, again, another switch. So look at this. We are totally under the shelter of the material energy, which is not a good shelter, because things are just changing, and then we're at the mercy of the environment. It's like if you're in an ocean, just a gigantic ocean, and it happens to be calm, and you think, oh, life is good, everything is calm. I feel peaceful. Wow, I'm so proud of myself. I feel peaceful. And then a storm comes. And then you're subject to that storm. And you think, what's going on? I have no power. I can't control this. What can our swimming do against a storm in the ocean? Nothing. Yes, Satyaraj Prabhu. Yeah, that's right. Superman. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing, right? Yeah, think of that moment where you were just really suffering and you felt powerless. That's revealing something. But then things stabilize, something in the planets shift, And then I'm okay suddenly. Oh, life is good. But so therefore, to even when life is good, but still to remember our dependence, that's very powerful. That's the place we want to be in, to realize I'm at the mercy. But what I really want to talk about is this realization that we're under we only have one choice in life. We're always dependent. We're always dependent, but the real choice, we talk about us, the living entities, tatashta shakti, which means we're the energy of God that's on the border between two things. Tatashta means to be on the border. So the real choice is that will I surrender and put myself under the shelter of the material energy or the spiritual energy? That's our choice. All these little choices we make down here aren't really choices. It's the material circumstances changing, and then we're helpless. The modes change, and then I change with them. Because I'm surrendered to the material energy. So whatever it does, I just have to respond, and I'm helpless. But when we realize that this is what's happening, that I've surrendered to the material energy, but now I also understand there's a spiritual energy, and I want to put myself under that. That's free will. What is our free will right now? We call it free will. We're walking around, we're choosing, I want to do this, I want to do that. We're just responding usually to the environment, and if I don't feel good today, then I'm not going to do that. Or if this happens, if this other thing happens in my life, and I can't do that, what I had planned. So we have free will, but it gets very, very covered to the extent that we are really, as Prabhupada will say in this purport we'll read, kind of enwrapped by the material energy. We're totally under the shelter and the influence of the material energy. And we think we're making all kinds of choices. But the real choice awakens when we see that this is what's happening. I'm under the material energy and I'm being controlled. But now I want to put myself under the spiritual energy. Yes, Ladini Shakti Prabhu. Mm-hmm.
I want to make a fine point because I have a particular friend of mine who has been exposed to Krishna consciousness but has not been really deeply wrapped.
Yeah.
But is a very spiritual person.
Yeah.
And a self-consciousness spiritual person. And this person had a tremendous setback while they were in prayer. And because they were in prayer, to this vague conception of God, but not really so personal, not Krishna, but a vague conception, they were able to navigate the potential disaster pretty well. And when everything turned out, it looked very favorable. There was an accident, the city was responsible, there was an award, a lot of money, there was a school, and then a career out of it. So, but the person didn't have what Arjuna had. Arjuna was realizing, is Krishna my friend that I used to lie on the bed with and tell jokes that I ate with, who drove my chariot, who was my friend. So Arjuna had a personal relationship with the personality of God.
Yeah.
So, I kind of lament that my friend is still on the way to Krishna and not having arrived. But I realize it's good. My friend is putting attention on God.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't really know God.
Mm-hmm.
And consequently is very, very satisfied with everything that came from the accident. That's very good.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no longing for Krishna,
Yeah.
which is the very special gift that Arjuna has
Mm-hmm.
of Bhakti.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great point. It's right here in this verse, my most intimate friend, Krishna. That connection is a whole nother level. So we hope that this a kind of spiritual conception and understanding the difference between matter and spirit, we hope that's a stepping stone to a relationship with God. It's not necessarily so, right? There has to be some kind of decision of the heart to surrender to the person, Krishna. But still, we hope that we can still relieve some of the suffering and some of the pain by understanding spiritual and material dynamics. So that's good. In some way, it's lifting us a little bit above the material energy. We can only hope and pray that it leads to a kind of that connection to Krishna relationship. And this is where the real love takes place. And not just an understanding of spirit and matter and how to navigate, but there's actually transcendental emotions that are there and that arise in that relationship with God, which is the highest perfection of life. So we hope it goes there, but there has to be a decision in the person also, and they have to have the association of such people who are living that, and they become attracted to it, to see that there's something here in a relationship with Krishna. Is the most, it's the final level. Yeah. Anyone else? Comments, questions on this point? No? Okay, so we're always dependent. And then this choice is, will I go, will I surrender? We have surrendered. We've surrendered to the material energy. But we can also change that and now surrender to the spiritual energy when we start to see and understand actually what's going on. Now here it appears that Arjuna, we'll read these verses and the purport, it appears that he's just like others. You know, he was fought in the battle of Kurukshetra, and there were ups and downs. Every day there was victories and defeats, and sometimes he's lamenting, and Arjuna came to understand his son had been killed and lamented because of that. He just seems to be an ordinary warrior. So it's hard to see when someone is actually operating under the spiritual energy. It looks almost like the same thing. When we see a very spiritually advanced person, we can sense something in their presence, but then after all, we see them just living like other people are living, and we could have some doubt that they're just like me. So it's very hard to see when someone is actually under the spiritual energy in some ways. So let's read these verses in the purport, and Prabhupada will explain this, that it appears that Arjuna is just a warrior fighting, but actually he's under a different energy. This has to go beyond just being theoretical, these two energies, but we have to really start to feel that there are two energies. There's a material energy that I'm surrendered to, and then there's also a spiritual energy I can go under and take shelter of, and then everything changes in that level. Everything is uplifting, everything is connecting. So let's read these verses. So we'll go to 1:15:28. And we'll just read everything, and if we have to stop somewhere, we'll have a little discussion. But let's read that to the end of the purport that's there. Any volunteers that could read these next few verses leading to the purport?
Thus, being deeply absorbed in thinking of the instructions of the Lord, which were imparted in the great intimacy of friendship, and in thinking of his lotus feet, Arjuna's mind became pacified and free from all material contamination.
Thank you. Next verse.
Arjuna's constant remembrance of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna rapidly increased his devotion, and as a result, all the trash in his thoughts subsided.
Trash. Next verse.
Because of the Lord's pastimes and activities, and because of his absence, it appeared that Arjuna forgot the instructions left by the personality of God. But factually, this was not the case. And again, he became Lord of the senses.
Okay, then I have the purport here. Just read the first paragraph of the purport, if somebody would please do so.
A conditioned soul is enwrapped in his fruitive activities by the force of eternal time. But the Supreme Lord, when he incarnates on the earth, is not influenced by kala or material conception of past, present, and future. The activities of the Lord are eternal, and they are manifestations of his Atma Maya or internal potency.
So that's that higher spiritual energy, that Krishna himself is always within that Atma Maya, that energy of the Atma, of the soul. And then a devotee also has to come under that same energy. We can only have that relationship with God when we become godly. When we become godly, when we come under the shelter of that energy, then we're with Krishna, because he's always in that energy, and we have to relate in that energy. Thank you. Continue, please, to the end of the paragraph.
All pastimes or activities of the Lord are
so it appeared that Arjuna and the Lord were engaged in the battle of Kurukshetra, as the other party was also engaged. But factually, the Lord was executing his mission of incarnation and association with his eternal friend Arjuna. Therefore, such apparently material activities of Arjuna did not drive him away from his transcendent position, but on the contrary, revived his consciousness of the songs of the Lord as he sang them personally. This revival of consciousness is assured by the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita as follows. Vandana bhava tatma vyaj nandanastu, vandavaishasi satyam te, pratyajnane kuyasmi.
You can just read that last, one more paragraph, please. Thank you.
One should think of the Lord always. Mind should not forget him. One should become a devotee of the Lord and offer obeisances unto him. One who lives in that fashion becomes undoubtedly endowed with the blessings of the Lord by achieving the shelter of his lotus feet. There is nothing to doubt about this eternal truth, because Arjuna was his confidential friend. The secret was disclosed.
Thank you. So the secret was disclosed to Arjuna. What is that secret? It's that you can live and work and act under this other energy. And even though it looks the same as someone under material consciousness, it says here it's completely blessed by the Lord. The whole thing is blessed. So many people fought in the battle of Kurukshetra. But because Arjuna and the Pandavas were completely surrendered to the Lord and that spiritual energy, everything that happened to them was a blessing. Even though it looks like what happened to them happened to others people lost family members, other people lost their lives, they struggled, there was ups and downs. All of that was there. But it was being experienced differently according to which energy we're under. And so, therefore, you can see everything that was happening to Arjuna, it was always underneath this blessing because of his surrender to Krishna. So our lives can be like that. We have a life where there's some happiness, distress, we identify with all, we're struggling, we're up, we're down. But when that surrender takes place to the spiritual energy, then all of those things are blessed. It's all a blessing. We're actually operating under a different energy. So how is this possible? How do we make that change? From being, right now we're surrendered to the material energy and therefore we're thrown by all the changes in circumstances. How do we make that change from being under that energy, so strongly connected to it and identified with it, to seeing what's going on and then coming under the spiritual energy? That's the big question, right? Anyone have any? Yes, Ladini Shakti Prabhu. Yeah. 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 Mm. Yeah. 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 Hearing. When we're hearing from the Shastra, we are associating with the spiritual energy. We may not always realize it, but just to open the heart to it and hear. But you have to hear in a certain way. We have blocks from hearing. We have doubts. We have so many things. That's natural. We have to deal with those. But there's a way where it says in the Bhagavatam, the way to hear, pibanti katamratam. This kata of Krishna has to be, you have to drink it. You have to completely drink it. You know, like you drink some beverage, it just goes in. And it just goes in. There's no, we keep things in our mouth and spit it out. Or we'll kind of, there's a way of just rejecting the message. And there's a way where we're closed, even though we're listening. The ears are listening, but we're kind of closed. But when you drink, it's just immediately, it's in your system. But that requires a certain faith, and we get that faith from hearing. We have to face our doubts and have questions and inquire. And then in that questions and answer back and forth, we start to realize this is actually true. When you can actually start to, when these two energies I'm talking about, the material energy and spiritual energy, in one sense it's theoretical, but when you start to really conceive of the reality of the spiritual energy, then you open to it in a whole new way, and you want it to go in. You want it to change your life. You want to just open your heart to it. So to hear in that way, that's why there's so many stories that are told in the Bhagavatam, and they always end that if one hears this with faith, then they will very quickly attain the lotus feet of Krishna. They will very quickly attain love of God. If you can hear with faith, but that faith is a total opening of the heart. And so we're wondering, oh, that blessing is there for me. Why is it not happening? It just says if I just hear this pastime, everything will be done. But what's the quality of that hearing? So faith means a total opening of the heart, and that may take some time. But by, as Ladini Shakti Prabhu was pointing out, by hearing and understanding and associating with the spiritual energy, it starts to open the heart. Yes, Prabhu. Yeah.
I really identify with this. I really identify with the mind.
Yeah.
It's very hard to just not identify with that. And both of you were saying that, you should actually just persevere and hear a lot for a very long time.
Yeah. And that's just what we have to do. Because definitely with time, if we continue hearing in the association of devotees, it goes from just being theoretical ideas that sound nice and interesting, it really starts to change us, and we really start to believe it. When you start to really conceive how it's possible, and then because of that, we want it to really go in more and sink in more. Yeah.
And just one more thing, I think the reason for that is just I was living in my own life, even whatever short life I've lived, but the way in which that life moves through chapters and phases.
Yeah.
And when that consistent vibration of hearing about the Lord, when it's present in all these different phases and chapters, it's like it builds up enough. Otherwise it's like, yeah, you could just hear something instantaneously, you hear the holy name instantaneously.
Yeah.
You can see Krishna, but because it's building up, and it takes a lot to convince me.
Yeah. 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 So then we just continue on. And it can suddenly come. It can come very suddenly where we have some realization of these things we're hearing over and over and over again. Sometimes we think, oh, Prabhupada is always saying we are not the body. I know that already. We know it up here. This little machine up here, we know it. We need to hear that until we really, I'm not this body. And I'm not this, whenever he says I'm not this body, he also means the subtle body. By the way, we always just think this physical body, but when we say you're not the body, it also means you're not this material mind and all of these thoughts that are coming from the material energy. We're also not that. And all these ideas of who we are, that our identification, we're also not that. So to realize you're not the body means to realize you're not the physical and subtle body. That is so advanced. You are free. You are fearless at that point. So we have to keep hearing with the understanding that I understand it, but I don't really get it. And so we have to keep that fresh mindset that please let this go in deeper. Let me really get this so that it changes my life. So we have to hear fresh, always hear fresh, as if it's a fresh new message. Prepare your mind to hear fresh. And then even if you're hearing the same thing over and over again, know that it hasn't really gone in. Therefore, Krishna, we can be in a prayerful mood when we hear, please let me realize this message. So many people are fooled spiritually, and they think they got it all because it's all intellectual, or somehow our minds can grasp things before they really enter our hearts and change our lives. It has to go through the mind first, but it's got to go a lot deeper than that. And when we think we just understand things up here, we're just fooling ourselves. It has to start that way, but then those messages have to really come down into our being. And then when that happens, then you start to live differently. And then when you see a pure devotee who's living that way, you say, oh, this has gone in. This has gone in. The soul is awakening. If we see no change whatsoever in our life, then we have to think, how deep has it gone in? Because when it goes in deep, then you have the lens. You view things differently. You see the world differently. You see the material energy operating, and you also understand when I'm not under the spiritual energy, when I'm too identified with the material energy. You see all this as it's happening. Any other comments, thoughts, questions? Yes, Prabhu.
One of my favorite utterances from Lord Chaitanya, he remarks to his intimates, if you see me crying when I'm chanting the holy name, know that it's just fake. Because if I really love Krishna, and I'm separated from Krishna, he's not right before me, I would give up my life.
Mm.
I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't do all the ordinary activities because that's what it means to love Krishna.
Yeah.
I can pretend,
Yeah.
but if there's real love, there's a total investment,
Yeah.
which is important to make it, but he makes it so emphatically.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Lord Chaitanya is teaching us, right? By these words. If you see me crying, know that it's not the real thing. Because if I really loved Krishna, I couldn't live. I couldn't live in this separation. Yeah, so, yeah, this is amazing. This is amazing spiritual knowledge. And we should just be careful of thinking that we've mastered it or we got it, and now I'm ready to move on to higher things. Okay, that's good. Bhagavad Gita, that's the ABCs. Now Bhagavatam, but then Bhagavatam, okay, I read that. Now Chaitanya Charitamrita. These are such elevated topics. They're so high. Keep going back to the Bhagavad Gita and just try to understand some basic things, because when they really happen inside of us, then we'll have access to the other things. But we're still given the blessing to take it all in, to read it all, to that way we're becoming acquainted with these higher things too. It's also important. Krishna's pastimes. To hear Krishna's pastimes is very important. Even at such a high level that we have no idea what's going on. We just think they're cute, There's a lot more than cute. Krishna's pastimes are unbelievably deep. Look at that picture of Mother Yashoda there, that painting. Think about what's going on there. She has God in her arms. The all-powerful, absolute truth who's controlling everything. Everything is emanating from God. What is Mother Yashoda's position? That she's holding him in her arms. She's got God in her grip. Just think about that. What is her consciousness? How is that possible? How can you embrace God like that? Shishi Radha Mulidhar ki, Shri Gaura Chandra ki. So it is so high. Is that God is the master and controller of everything. There's these beautiful verses in the Bhagavatam that everything is happening in fear of God. Not fear in the sense of that I'm afraid, but it says the wind blows from fear of God. The rain comes down from fear of God. The sun rises from fear of God. Fear of God means kind of this holy respect and reverence. When you have this reverence, it's a kind of fear, a positive fear in one sense. So everything is happening in fear of God. But God is running in fear of Mother Yashoda, of her stick. Prabhupada says that Krishna's running, everyone is in fear has that holy kind of reverence of God. But God is in fear of Mother Yashoda's stick. He's running away. And she's capturing him. So it's amazing. First of all, the reverence of God. Shantaras. Shantaras, this rasa of just the awe and reverence. And then you can get closer, where you can actually serve God. Dasya ras. Where you move closer and you actually want to personally serve God. And then that's kind of where it ends in the West. In Western teachings and there's little hints of other things, but mostly, reverence of God and service to God, that's it. What Krishna consciousness now goes to, you're not the servant, now you're a friend of God's. Imagine becoming a friend. The cowherd boys are playing with Krishna. And sometimes they play games, and sometimes Krishna loses the game. You beat Krishna. And then what happens after friendship? Friendship means equals, right? But now it totally reverses, and God becomes inferior. Parental love, where Mother Yashoda and Nanda are commanding Krishna and controlling him. So God takes an inferior position out of love. He actually becomes less than you, possibly. Parental love. He becomes subordinate. So we're way beyond, we're in just the mind can conceive of these things, but just really appreciate the beauty of it. And then there's conjugal love. There's a loving relationship like lover and beloved. It's also possible. which has all the other rasas inside of it. You know, when the relationship between, in this world, it's man and woman, but that lover and beloved, it has all the other rasas. There's friendship, there's parental care too. You care in a certain way, it somewhat resembles parental. So it has the different rasas there too, servitude. So we're going way beyond my realization, but we can still hear these things and just appreciate them and realize when we hear the pastimes of Krishna, this is what's happening. It's so beautiful, isn't it? It's so amazing. But again, this is all under the shelter of that spiritual energy. And the question I was asking is, how do we go from being surrendered to the material energy to the spiritual energy? What's the path that brings us under the shelter of the spiritual energy? Anyone else? So Hladini Shakti was mentioning hearing. What else helps us make that transition?
Well, when we realize that every energy is Krishna's energy, ultimately, then we want to go right to the source instead of getting knocked up in the can be marginal energy. Let's try to go right towards Krishna.
Yeah. So again, like seeing that these energies are there and then putting myself, just placing myself wherever that spiritual energy is. This is the spiritual energy. When we're just hearing about Krishna, when we're chanting, when we're associating with devotees, this is coming under the shelter. But the problem is we do that, right? We come under the shelter of the spiritual energy, but I'm still so plugged into the material energy. So how should I relate to the material energy? That's what I want to ask. Okay, so we know what we should do. We should come under the spiritual energy in all the forms of associating with. How do I disengage from the material energy? I mean, that in one sense does it when I leave, but what else? Anyone have thoughts on that? Yes. Okay. But suppose this is directly going to the spiritual energy, right? But is there any way, what's my attitude to the material energy? It's true. I'm just looking for something else, and we're going to see what Krishna says about it too. Yes, in the back?
Disengaging or disconnecting really just means connect. So there's a verse I was familiar with, it's in the 10th canto, that says, the house becomes a prison, the family members become chains and shackles, all these other things, as long as they're not engaged in the service of the Lord.
Okay.
So when these things are engaged in service, when I'm engaging my money, which otherwise is binding me, when I'm engaging my intelligence, when I'm engaging my body, my skills, when I'm engaging those in service, then I'm automatically, like in Bhagavad Gita,
Yeah.
14th chapter.
Yeah.
Anyway, when we're constantly engaged in their service,
Yeah.
you guys love material.
Yes. So when we're connecting, again, to the spiritual energy, then we're automatically disconnected from the material energy. So that's true, but I still want to offer a different idea that I have found helpful. And it's also Krishna's idea. It comes up in the Bhagavad Gita. Yes?
Krishna is giving us free will
Mm-hmm.
to choose him and focusing
Yeah.
on Krishna as opposed to material energy.
Yeah.
So on deciding with our free will to focus on our spiritual energy, we're
Yeah.
coming back to him.
Yeah. And then what should our attitude be to the material energy now? Okay, go to Krishna. Here, associate with devotees, directly connected, but I still have this material energy, and I'm really strongly attached to it too. It's not like I can just, I'm in this struggle. So what's kind of a conducive attitude towards the material energy that helps me disengage?
And I'm thinking of what Rana Swami, it's in his book, he's talked about often about when everybody forgot it was his mother's birthday. And he went out and he picked the rose that was his mother and offered it to his mother. So
Yeah.
he'd take the material energy, which is Krishna's anyway,
Yeah.
and we offer it back to him.
Okay. That's true. You're all right. You're all true. But I'm looking for something different because it's also found, what I'm going to present is also found everywhere, because there's always this idea of connecting to the spiritual, but there's also this idea of disengaging from the material, and there's something specific that can really help us. Ladini Shakti Prabhu? Okay. Yeah.
Now, when I can recognize it, I'm like, oh, I want to get away from this. I'm afraid of this. I know where this goes.
Mm-hmm.
I believe this.
Yeah. That's true. Okay. Yes. Yes.
So just thinking of the fact that like this material world is temporary and you're trying to seek happiness in this temporary world.
Yeah.
So I mean, why are we looking for the temporary? When we
Yes.
know what is temporary?
So it's temporary, so then what should our attitude be towards it?
So then it should be, we should consider it that way and just take it like that it is to make us teach the spiritual somehow to realize and just move on. It's a intermediate step. It's not the end goal.
Okay.
Just give it that position and use it to get to the ultimate.
Okay. All right. That's good. That's good. All right. We're going to look at 14th chapter. You mentioned the 14th chapter of the Gita. So let's first look at Arjuna's question, and we'll see how it's exactly what I'm asking. It sounds. Okay, that's getting. You're all getting in the vicinity. But I guess I just want to make one healthy attitude that can really be powerful. At least it was for me, and that's why I want to share it. So let's look at 14:21 and see first what Arjuna's question is, and we'll see how he's really getting at what we're trying to get at. And again, everything you guys are saying is true. I have something in my mind that I want to, and it's also Krishna's, not just my speculation. Krishna often goes here, and we have to try to understand deeply what it means. 14:21, is it up?
Yeah.
Someone want to read that? Arjuna stops to ask a question.
O my dear Lord, by which symptoms is one known who is transcendent to these three modes? What is his behavior, and how does he transcend the modes of nature?
How does he transcend the modes of nature? So Krishna's going to give some direction here. Let's look at his first response, the very next verse, which is, I think, 4 verses combined. Right? 22 to 25? Okay. Someone like to read these verses?
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O son of Pandu, he who does not hate illumination, attached to the illusion when they are present, or long for them when they disappear, who is unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions of material quality, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are happy, who is situated in the self in regards alike, happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, who is equal toward the desirable and the undesirable, who is steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, who treats alike both friend and enemy, and who has renounced all material activities. Such a person is said to have transcended the modes of nature.
Okay, so I want to show how this is not impossible. First of all, we get an idea of what material consciousness is just because of this verse. What is material consciousness? We talk about it all the time. It's kind of revealed in this verse. Anyone kind of get what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay. Material consciousness. This is material consciousness. This is good. This is bad. This is right. This is wrong. Oh, this is success. This is failure. This is fortunate. This is misfortune. This is pleasant. This is unpleasant. This is what it means to be in material consciousness. So our total absorption in that, our attachment to that, we don't know what's good and bad. We don't know what's right and wrong. But we immediately judge everything. Oh, this just happened in my life. This is bad. Right? We think this is bad for me. That's you're plugged into the material energy with that consciousness. But if you just don't judge it at all, imagine living this way. It's so nice to live this way. As soon as something happens in our life, we judge it, that this is good. This is good for me. Oh, this just worked out. We have no idea if it's good. In a few years, that could be a terrible thing. We have no idea. Or we think this thing just happened in the world. Oh, this is terrible. We have no idea. We can't see. Oh, it's such a limited what we can see. And often we see that what we thought was bad, that very thing, years pass, and wow, I'm so grateful that happened. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened, and so forth. So somehow, you always find this word, this equality in the face of duality, or this neutral position. Everything happening in the world, imagine if you can live where you don't judge any of it. You still can do things because of it, but you still also, you let go of that too. Then you just do it and let go of the result, and you have no idea, right? So, some examples. But the idea is not to have any opinion of anything happening in the material world. You have no opinion of it. You still do the needful, but then you drop it. You drop the opinion whether it's good or bad, right and wrong. Suppose someone comes up to you and insults you, and then immediately there's all this judgment. This is bad for me. Is it bad for you? Is that bad? If someone comes and says something to you that's hurtful or something like that, the identification and the absorption can make it really bad. But what if we're just like, okay, they just said this about me. Is that bad? Maybe it's good. Maybe I just learned something about myself. Or maybe I just let it go, whatever. I just see this person is controlled by the modes of nature. They couldn't help themselves and they spoke something. Anyway, move on with my life. Okay, there's some political change in the world. Donald Trump has become president. This is awful. Is it awful? Maybe it's so bad that it leads to something good. But we get so absorbed in what's happening, and we plug our minds into good, bad, right, wrong. We have no idea what's good, bad, right, wrong. Things can change completely. So you can still fight against what you think is wrong. You can still do something about it. You still can take a stand. But what if you could do that and also just totally let go of the results and be neutral, a kind of neutral goodwill, where you're just a good-hearted person living your life, going on, okay, this happens in life. Okay, how to react, how to respond, and then move on, let it go, and keep moving towards Krishna. And you're kind of unplugging from the material energy, because that absorption in the dualities keeps us so connected, and we have no idea what's good and bad, what's right and wrong. Narottam Das Thakur sings in one song that I have no idea what is right and wrong, what is good and bad. I just know Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then whatever he reveals to me, I speak. So it's kind of a neutral attitude to the world, everything happening in the world. And it doesn't mean you don't have to do things and that you don't take a stand where you find it's necessary, but also who knows if you're producing harm by the stand you're taking. So you do what you want to do, but also detach from the result and let go and keep moving. Just live. Just live like you're just a living being moving and acting in the world. You see what's happening, you respond, okay, now let it go. And keep connecting. Then keep hearing, keep chanting, keep associating with devotees. But this idea of a kind of neutral attitude, this is hard, right? And this is also, people don't like this because we want to fight for something. We want to fight for what's right. We want to fight for what's good. But what is good? What is right? There's a higher duality that's real. These lower dualities they're all kind of like dreams. Like a good dream, bad dream. You're mentioning dreams, right? So bad dream nobody likes, but after all, it's a dream. Good dream is also just a dream, so you can't get too excited about it. But you really want to wake up and live. So to wake up spiritually, to come under the spiritual energy, you're awakening to a whole nother level of pure goodness. That's where we want to be. So we want to associate with that spiritual energy of pure goodness, but we also want to disengage. Disengage doesn't mean become passive and do nothing. You could do whatever you want. You can fight for whatever cause, but you still realize that I have no idea if I'm doing good or harm. Maybe for the moment it's good, but what am I creating in the world? I don't know. And therefore, when terrible things happen in the world and we think this is terrible, this is bad, but maybe that leads to a change, which again becomes good. Usually that's how it happens. When things get so bad, then something good happens, because the dualities are always shifting. They're always going back and forth. This is just the modes of nature moving. We're so identified with it that it's hard to grasp this sometimes. But these are the modes of nature just moving in this world. Everything's always changing. You know, there's always some war that breaks out. We think this is terrible, and then we fight for peace. Okay, maybe that's good. But then how long before there's war again? There's never been a time where there hasn't been war. Peace and war, love and hate, good and bad, happiness and distress, these are always coming and going, coming and going, coming and going. This is material life. This is material energy. How much am I identified with it all? If I can disengage a little bit and then focus my mind on what's truly good, that spiritual energy, come under that shelter, then I'm really armed with two things. Now, all the direct things that you were all mentioning, but these two things are always mentioned in the 15th chapter of the Gita too, that detachment from the root of this material tree and also surrender to God. They're always put together. One thing of disengaging and another thing of connecting. But this is how you disengage. You don't judge anything that's happening. Or if you judge, you take it lightly, because what do we know? Okay. What are your thoughts on that? Does it seem crazy or what? Yes.
I think it's like I definitely appreciate this point that it's always kind of coupled, right? There's like
Yeah.
surrender and detachment.
Yeah.
But I don't. And you maybe you can give some. You said it was very practical for you. I don't. For my own self, I don't know if, because we also hear that from devotional service automatically arises Vigyan and Vairagya.
Yeah.
It's like realize knowledge and detachment.
Yeah.
So that is a result of engaging in service,
Yeah.
engaging in our activities, like engaging in our talents,
Mm-hmm.
well, and all these things in service, that active thing. I've never heard that it comes as a result. You know what I mean? That by adopting this mentality, and the reason I think that it's, for me,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't feel, I'm not like robotic. Like I definitely have like this is good, this is bad,
Mm-hmm.
I like this, I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we hear like there is this new age kind of conception that it's like, yeah, don't judge anything.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not so realistic. Like you still have a favorite type of fruit,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you have a favorite type of smoothie or whatever.
Yeah.
You dress a certain way.
Yeah.
But you can engage all those things in service.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely know what you're saying. And so, yeah, let's look at this, because again, it's Krishna's response in lots of places to do this. And so it is true that by engaging in devotional service, vairagya, detachment, awakens. But what's awakening is this realization that we're talking about. You disengage now from the material energy. You're getting the realization that it's not there. It's here. It's something higher. So you're just getting, from devotional service, you'll get this realization that I'm sharing now, right? It awakens it. It awakens this detachment from the material energy, and where you can observe and see what's happening. And you take things less personal because you don't know. So we'll look at a few more verses. I know there's more hands, but I want to look at a few more verses that just confirm. I want to show how what I'm saying is everywhere also, and in many places. And it's worth really reflecting on and seeing if right here and now I can adjust a kind of way of viewing the material energy that will be helpful for me. Because it's true that just by devotional service, everything will happen, right? But is that working? Is that working? For me. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What is our priority? Is my priority that I'm just going around like, oh, maybe good, maybe bad? Or is my priority like, how can I see this in connection with Krishna?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. That's always the first thing. But it's still there's always two things mentioned: practice and detachment. There's always the positive and a negative. Every yoga system has this. Every kind of system of yoga must have a way of detaching. And Prabhupada will also comment like this many times. He'll say that, when you have some disease or some fever, there's two things you have to do. This is an example he gives very often. You take the medicine, but also you restrict some certain things from your diet. Right? So stopping certain things, and then taking something. We will find these two things are always together, and they're both important. I mean, I don't feel like I'm going to just totally forget that other thing and just keep. I think that will do it, but I think I find also that a certain attitude towards the material, understanding it now and disengaging has been helpful. I'm feeling like I can take more shelter. I can be more free when I take shelter of Krishna because I'm seeing things a little bit differently down here. So that's just a point of view. But I know there's more hands. I want to look at a couple more verses that I think will give us further insights about this. So, okay, the Gita again, 520. And then we'll look at a couple verses from the Bhagavatam. We'll find this everywhere in the Gita about the dualities and overcoming them. 520? Want to read that, Korkuma?
A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant, nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who's self-intelligent, who's unbewildered, and who knows the signs of God, is already situated in transcendence.
Okay, again, the transcendental platform. The science of God is there, and also one who's not taking what this is pleasant, this is unpleasant, but somehow remaining neutral. Let's look at Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya Lila. This is a famous verse, nice verse. 4th chapter, 176 verse. You got that? Yeah. Any readers?
In the material world, conceptions of good and bad are all mental speculations. Therefore, saying this is good and this is bad is all a mistake.
Okay. Saying this is good and this is bad is all a mistake. You can still do it, but you don't take it. You don't know. You can take a stand. You can live the way we want to live and fight for certain things, but there's a certain way in which, see, a lot of it is false ego activity, that this is good and this is right and this is the right thing to do and we fight for this cause. It's all false ego. But if you have no false ego, you could still fight, but it's not this false ego passion that's there. You're aloof. And you do what's necessary and you move on. And because you're so free and you can take shelter of Krishna, you can hear in a different way. You can chant in a different way because when you chant, you're free to take shelter of the material energy. So just imagine the struggle when we're totally plugged into all of this and we're trying to chant. Now the chanting, if you keep chanting, you will start to learn this and understand this and then disengage. But why not know also now and try to understand how we can do it to help ourselves? Laidini Shakti Prabhu.
I love what you're developing. I'm reflecting on the fact that I'm actually talking to an intimate friend. And the person is going through things in the world that are causing them to have to confront this.
Yeah.
They're not taking it the way a devotee who's fixed in emotional service. So I find myself saying things like this. It's all, how do you know what's good? How do you know what's bad? And I'm kind of relentlessly pursuing that. And then every once in a while, I reverse because I realize it's too much.
Yeah.
I really don't get it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about the past time with Gopinath Acharya and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya.
Yeah.
How Gopinath would sometimes criticize and say, you're foolish. You really don't get it.
Yeah.
Other times he's very respectful. Oh, you're so wise, you're so learned.
Yeah.
Because we have to be sensitive. This is really,
Yeah.
as you say, very elevated
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And it does come from our practice of Krishna consciousness automatically.
Yeah.
And we can help people to get a grip on how to negotiate the problems of life by trying out this formula, if you will.
Yeah.
But then again, we have to recognize that when people are, all they know is
Yeah.
material, sensual, intellectual plane.
Yeah.
Then you have to sometimes, oh, that's so bad. Oh, yeah, I understand. I
Yeah.
experience those things too.
Yeah.
You know, and then you go back to it. I
Yeah.
think there's a little bit of a dance.
Yeah, and we can still empathize with the suffering and the difficulties and connecting to it because we know that difficulty. We know what it's like to be totally, entrapped by the material energy and the pain that causes. But we also understand that the real solution is under the spiritual energy. And so we're empathizing, we're connecting to it, and maybe we fight for it too. We fight for a change, but we're not fooled that that's the answer. That turning that distress to happiness on the material level, we're not fooled that that's the actual solution. So make things happy, make things a little better for some time, but they will also turn back to distress. That's how that's the history of the material world. That's all that's happening. The dualities are always just changing. And the more you push towards the good, the more you evoke the bad. Because now it's a pendulum. So you're pushing fast towards the good, and now it's going to bring another uprising of people who are bad, and they're against exactly what you want. And so the stronger you fight for what's good, you're also empowering the bad. And then the empowered bad will also evoke the good. And then here you have the dualities that are always changing in the material world. So disengaging from that and connecting to God is the real solution. I want to look at a couple more verses. This is Bhagavatam 6:17-20. We have just a few minutes left. 6:17-20. Someone like to read that?
The material world resembles the waves of a constantly flowing river. Therefore, what is a curse and what is a favor? What are the heavenly planets and what are the hellish planets? What is actually happiness and what is actually distress? Because the waves flow constantly, none of them has an eternal effect.
So the waves of the changing of blessing, curse, happiness, distress, these are waves just going on, and we're so absorbed in them. We're so identified with them that we stay connected to them forever until we realize this. You'll just swing back and forth until you realize there's something besides this ocean. How do I get out of this ocean? You can still be involved in all of these things, but this is a kind of spiritual realization with kind of detachment that's talked about everywhere. Let's look at 6:17-29 and 30. A couple more verses. Someone like to read 6:17-29 and 30? No, they're separate, but we'll read them both. Any volunteers?
Because of the actions of the Supreme Lord's external energy, the living entities are conditioned in contact with material bodies. The dualities of happiness and distress, birth and death, curses and favors, are natural byproducts of this contact with the material world.
And the next one? You can read the next one as well. It's just
As one mistakenly considers a flower garland to be a snake, or experiences happiness and distress in a dream, so in the material world, by lack of careful considerations, we differentiate between happiness and distress, considering one good and the other bad.
So we're finding this everywhere due to a lack of consideration. So that's why I'm just stressing, let's consider this. And it's a challenging insight, but this is what makes us different than others who are giving all kinds of other messages. The other message in the world is there's distress, now go towards happiness. But what they mean is the opposite of the other side of the duality. There's the dualities, and they're all connected to each other. Good, bad, heat, cold, happiness, distress, love, hate. And so whenever the bad one comes that we don't like, we think the solution is to go to the good one. But that's not transcendental good. That's material good, and it swings back to material bad. And so just to see this happening in the world is all I'm suggesting. To start to see it. We can start to conceive of it. If you can conceive of it, it means you're on the verge of realization. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then maybe it'll take some more time. But if you kind of start to get this and start to feel it and you start to see it happening in the world, then naturally you'll start to see the truth and you'll start to disengage. And then you taking shelter of that spiritual energy will be with so much more quality because you have some realization behind it. And you want to take shelter of that spiritual energy knowing that that is the real solution. So Krishna consciousness, as we're all pointing out, will lead to these realizations, but we're looking ahead of time also at this reality and just trying to reach to it with our hearts and not just our minds. Yes, Prabhu, I know you had your hand up for a while, so I'll let you.
What helped me to see that was when I was fortunate enough to be a brahmachari for many years. But the benediction of the duality in the material world was what got me there. Because I got that experience. I was suffering. And then I read the books of Prabhupada. That was knowledge. Now, it was not purified enough to live it.
Yeah.
But I got it smart. A devotee was very expert in seducing me. He said, why don't you do like college? Why don't you do a associate's degree? A year. He tricked me.
Yeah.
I still didn't do it for years. But I started getting all of this information, ran into the temple, and then he said, don't worry, this is a taste. Krishna consciousness is a taste. You'll lose the taste. And really, when I came to Krishna, Krishna's like, you got me, you got everything. You know, all religions surrender to me. I know what it is. Then my sister guru said, so what do you find in the transformation of brahmachari? I said, there's nothing else. I felt it. See, what you're talking about is life. We're not living. No, everyone's got a death certificate here. This is not life. Satchitananda Vidyata. That's life. We're not living. We're dying. Krishna says, time I am. I'm sorry. It's over. You got the docket number. You're dying. You're not living. Now I know there is no more desire. There's no desire. There's no sin. There's no devil made me do it. Christ is going to save me. There is a natural constitutional relationship of you being a servant of Krishna. That's all that there is. So when I was serving Lord Chaitanya from Nityananda, I had this renunciation that all I could tell you was natural. It was completely natural. No desire for women, very little to eat. I was stepping 64 rounds a day. I served every, I had no sense of anything.
Yeah.
I saw dogs chanting Hare Krishna. Dogs. A dog came up. Woo, 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 woo. And the owner was an evil. He said, no, he couldn't get the dog away. And I started crying. I'm like, we're all Krishna conscious. Woo, 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 woo. And this owner, so what I'm saying is what you're talking about, the good news is we now have life. We have eternal life and no one will die here. Prabhupada said, if you trust this science, I can put you back home. E.T. going, we're all extraterrestrials. Don't belong here. Prabhupada said the worst thing you've done is science.
Yeah, and in fact, this will end with Arjuna's last verse, and again, this will go right aligned with what you're sharing, how when you're in this transcendental consciousness, then one also becomes free from the duality, the final duality of birth and death. One overcomes death, because one's no longer living in duality, but they're in this, the oneness, where in that oneness there's also diversity. There's diversity in oneness, but it is also one thing and not dualistic. So this dualism usually just refers to the material plane of what we're talking about. And then there's transcendence, which has variety in it, but it's all one, advayam gyan, non-dual consciousness and truth. So last verse I have on the sheet there. I'll just read it myself. And because of his possessing spiritual assets, the doubts of duality were completely cut off. So we're talking about Arjuna. Thus he was freed from the three modes of material nature and placed in transcendence. There was no longer any chance of his becoming entangled in birth and death, for he was freed from material form. So, thank you all so much for coming, and happy to talk more during Prasadam if anybody would like. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Ki Jai. Any Mridanga players? Shri Shri Radha Mulidhar. And then Shri Gaura Chandra. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Nami. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatari. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,